Welcome to the first episode of Fancastic, the podcast that serves as your master class to master CAS. And how do we deliver this? Because we have Kristy Triantos right there, one of the accounting profession's most seasoned CAS experts, leading you through all things CAS today. So hi, Christine.
Hi, Kristy. How are you? Thank you for
I-
having me.
I'm great. Well, it's your show. Of course, I'm going to have you. I'm going to have you every week, right? This is going to be so amazing. But as it's our first episode, can you give a little bit of your background? I just set you up as one of the accounting profession's most seasoned CAS experts, and I want people to know why.
Well, thank you. Yes, absolutely. I have grown up in public accounting, right? So 30 years ago, I started my professional career at BDO and it's just grown from there. So I was an early adopter in the CAS space. So we started a CAS practice, Michelle Welch and I, about 15 years ago.
I
I
know
always say,
Michelle.
yeah, being an early adopter just meant that we didn't have a lot to follow and we failed a lot. And so we learned a lot. And so part of that is just my passion of what we do now and how we are trying to work with firms and just bring everything that we did wrong. And so much has changed, right? I mean, in CAS, it's ever changing. But from there was the CFO for our firm, and then started the CAS team, and then BDO reacquired us in 2020. So then I was the regional partner for their CAS practice and also oversaw the national CAS technology team because at the end of the day, Michelle and I are uber tech nerds. And so that just lends well to the CAS space. So it's just the passion for this space coupled with technology is just fun for us.
Well, that is a whole lot of CAS experience. So who better to lead this discussion than you? So I say we get started.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, let's do it. So, this is the foundational episode. So, let's start at the foundation of building a successful CAS practice. You and I have talked about this. We have both interacted with hundreds, maybe even thousands of firms over our careers. And I know that you came back to me when we started talking about doing the Fancastic podcast, and you had said that there is a consistent theme that CAS organizations, the teams, the departments, the CAS firms, if it's a specific CAS firm, they feel like they're on an island. And part of that reason is that the goals in place are more aligned with the traditional firm. And that's really not the way to set up a successful CAS practice. So can you answer the question, why don't traditional firm goals align with CAS success?
Yeah. And I think that, even to back it up even just a bit to what you're saying to really hone in on it is that traditional public accounting has, the audit tax practices. And so it's also like, why do people feel like they're on a CAS island? And it's because, even though it's been around for 15 years, it's still a newer business line, right? And so that just concrete way of how traditional accounting firms are ran is in that audit tax mode, in how it's serviced here, in how it's built, and all of the things just follow that. And so really now insert a new business line and it's like, okay, now how do we redirect and how do we even start to think about things differently for CAS versus what we did audit and tax? And that's hard, right? Because that's a huge mindset shift that I don't think a lot of firms realize needs to happen. And so then as these CAS leaders come in, it's just really hard for them to change that mindset and move the needle, right? And some of the major differences, let's just start with the first because it's always been the crux of public accounting is charge hours, billable
Yeah,
hours, budgeted
sure.
billable hours, charge hours, charge hours, charge hours. And granted, that is revenue, right? But it's also what we find counterproductive to building a CAS team because what you're trying to do is say, okay, hey, push all of the work. So in addition to that, now we're pushing work offshore, we're pushing work down, technology is coming in, it's replacing a lot of that lower level work too. And so,
And
you know,
AI.
and AI,
One.
right, right? And so it's just like, how do we foster these CAS teams being efficient and effective with this budgeted billable hour goal that's just front and center? And, when we say front and center, it is in a lot of firms, it is a daily conversation. What's your utilization? Where are we at with charge hours? What are you working on? And not that that's wrong, right? It's not a wrong thing. It's just different because really when we also talk about the differences in audit and in a traditional public accounting firm, you don't have the tech stack that you do in CAS, right? And so
Yeah,
we're asking
correct.
these professionals to learn different things, but be efficient. And so how are we helping and aiding and changing just the mindset? Are we going to come in and change all of the firm's mindset? No. But can we at least move the needle a little bit so that it's conducive to building and growing the CAS teams?
So can we go back to chargeable hours? Because obviously the billable hour has been the center of discussions over the years, especially in terms of value-based pricing for advisory services. I mean, are you saying that firms shouldn't track hours at all?
No, absolutely not, because we're never going to go there. We're all A type people. We have to track hours, right? Aside from accountants being A type people, no, I'm not saying that we don't need to track hours. What I'm saying is that we need to realign the incentives around those budgeted billable hours, right? Because we just, for many reasons, we don't have a true picture. I always say, right or wrong, you give uh, somebody 10 hours to work on something and it takes them 2 hours, they need their billable hours. So what are they going to do? They're going to charge 10 hours, right? I mean, it's just they need the hours. And the reason they need the hours is because those chargeable hours are tied to their compensation, they're tied to their
Right.
promotion. I mean, it's very personal for them, right? And it becomes this kind of like fear of if I did just charge my 2 hours that I worked and I don't meet my billable hours, am I going to be in trouble? Like, is my job at risk? What's going to happen to me? And so my whole thing is w- take all of that pressure of how billable hours are tied to their personal compensation and promotions and let's realign them. Not that you're going to have less charge hours, but it's just going to be directed different. But in order to do that, though, you have to. I used to always tell my team, work yourself out of a job and trust me that you won't. Because what you then have to do is create that pipeline, right? Create the pipeline of work that they can take on, revamp their goals so that they're incented to take on more clients. Doesn't mean that we're asking them to work more. It just means that we're asking them to implement technology and push work where they can.
But asking them to really work within a better framework is what I'm hearing. So my follow-up question to that, and I'm taking notes as we go, is can you give me an example? Can you give the listeners an example of what revised goals might look like, a revised framework might look like for a CAS
Yep,
team?
absolutely. And there's a lot, and we can provide those as well, but there's a lot just to consider, right? So one of the goals that Michelle and I implemented with our team too was to you are expected to take on 3 new clients in this quarter or this time frame, whatever that time frame is, right? And it's not about again, it's not about working more, but how are we incenting you to be more productive and efficient with what you have, right? And so that's a big one, but also if you did just create those efficiencies, you're not in trouble if you don't have any, charge hours now it's on us to create that pipeline and to go sell. So that's one. The other is to become, our team had the goal of becoming a tech champion and something that they were passionate about too. And so the more tech champions that you have within your CAS team, the more you're able to scale that for efficiencies too. So it really, there's so many pieces to that, but it really is making sure though that from a firm perspective that they are protected to a sense and they feel safe in being able to really charge hours that are actual. Because what happens in addition to this is when it looks like they're at capacity, then we don't give them more work. We're like, oh my gosh, we don't want to like overload them, right? So they look like they're at capacity. So what do traditional firms do? We throw people at the problem
Yeah,
always, right?
always, always. More people, more
Let's
people, more people. Accumulation, more people.
Right. That's gonna fix it. Like, if we just get more people, it's gonna fix all of our problems, and we're gonna have more revenue, we're gonna do all of these things, right? But it's just not the most efficient. So, when we consult with firms, after having left public accounting, Michelle and I started Infinite Advisors, which is a CAS consulting just in the CAS space. We are so passionate about this space that that's the only thing that we do. So working with firms, we come in and we assess their current client base, and it's shocking at the level of work that's being done at the manager management level, right? So going back to your question, Christy, what are those goals that, you can incorporate? It's taking, okay, we see that 85% of this client work is being done at the manager level. Okay, you need to shift, 30% of that down or to somebody else that's at the lower level. So creating these exact incentives of here's the number of clients that you need to push down. You need to go implement technology to create efficiency on 3 clients, right? You need to do this for just these clients. Then when you get like to the top, the higher level from a CAS leader perspective, I also too just say, every firm has these just stupid goals of what you have to bring in for new business. But what if we just focused on gross margin and we just perfected what we had and we either like doubled or increased on some level the gross margin? Like, let's just take that focus from gross down to the bottom line.
Yeah, and everything you're talking about, from my perspective, and having been in this profession for 25 years, is it is a big departure from the traditional mode of firm operations. So, I mean, specifically, let's be honest, compensation. We live in a profession that is ruled by formulas and math, and you're talking about something very different for CAS practices. So, I mean, it all sounds great, but how do you keep the team motivated
Yeah.
beyond like just more work, you know?
Right. And I think what you said too, there are 2 questions there. So I want to come back to that, but also, how do you get buy-in also from your leadership and management to say, yes, you can do that, right? Because that's where a lot of has teams and leaders feel like they're kind of stifled. But part of that too is in the pricing. And, we'll do multiple podcasts on pricing. But when you come at this from a fixed fee perspective and you're not impacting the firm revenue. And in fact, you're creating sustainability with that fixed fee rather than the hourly. So, because a lot of this charge hour piece comes into obviously, you don't want to create efficiencies and push work down and then just decrease your revenue, right? That's also counterproductive. So, we don't want to do that either. So, what you have to do, this is a plan. This is a 6, 9, 12-month plan where you have to say, okay, all of these clients, we know what we work on, we've scoped them. We've been doing this. We know this very well. We want to repaper these clients into a fixed fee and come back and say, hey, you know what? Here's everything that it's going to include. And again, we'll do another podcast on all of that because there's value and there's the scope. But this again, though, is saying we're going to create sustainability at that revenue. So we're not asking, we don't want to see that drop in revenue either. So that's the number one is buy-in. Once you get that buy-in from the firms, now going back to your question too of how do you keep the teams motivated?
Mhm.
If we can just create just these shifts, I implemented this. I'm actually charging exactly what it is the hours I'm working. I'm able to work on various clients and see more things, which is what I want to do. I don't want to be stuck on a couple clients, but I'm probably stuck on a couple clients because it looks like I'm full, but I'm really not, and so but it is that security and safety, and I tell firms, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say push all this work and then be like, why don't you have enough charge hours? And it's not their responsibility always at certain levels to go and find new clients. So what are we doing with the marketing team? What are we doing with business development? How are we building this pipeline so that when we do have them push work down, there's plenty of work to fill that at the right levels.
2 things I wanna mention I don't wanna run past. The first is you mentioned timeline, 6, 12, 18 months. I think it's really important to mention that you do not change the trajectory of a CAS operation overnight. I mean, it takes time. And just starting at this foundation of rethinking goals is going to take time. So, it is a process. It is not easy, but it's doable. That's what I heard. And the second thing is you mentioned having marketing support, right? Up to marketing to bring in to fill that funnel. A lot of teams don't have marketing support. A lot of firms start a CAS practice and they say, you're on an island. You do, and they're doing everything themselves. I mean, is that Is that true as well? I want people to feel like they're not so alone out there. I think this is a common thing that CAS leaders, CAS teams are sort of left on an island to do their own marketing, to sell out, and then to actually do the work. And that's a problem too.
Right. And so, the two-part question, which I think is really important. First off, is it a 6 to 18 months transition? Absolutely. And what firm leaders need to understand is that it does take time. This isn't you know what, we need to fix our revenue and we need to go get, all these millions of dollars of new revenue in the next 3 months. Or, that's not how this works, right? And so where I think what's really important too is when we come into firms and we say, okay, what's your revenue goal? And then we put it into various buckets. And we just say, okay, how much can you upsell? How much can you cross sell? What's going to come from new clients? How many clients are you going to lose? Because people are like, I want to bring that back in house, So, but then now let's back into that goal with people and hours and types of clients and when they start. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this is like a real plan. But
Right.
also part of that conversation is we have all these clients and it's sad, but it actually costs us money to serve them. Right. So for every new client that we get, we say, have a conversation with your bottom client. And Michelle and I did this a lot. And we would say, it's I call it the breakup email. It's not you, it's me. Like, I priced you wrong. I'm so sorry. It's my fault. I priced you wrong. And so here's what we've done. And in order for us to continue working with you, we have to double, if not triple your fee. We totally understand if that doesn't work for you. We'll help you offboard. We'll help you find another firm. Did not have one client that said no, not one. So now we're saying, okay, now you just increased your margin, doubled, tripled, increased your margin from where you were with that client, and you got a new client. So this isn't like let's go fire all of our clients, right? This is what you and I are saying is it's a 6, 9, 12, 18-month process that just takes time. So there's that piece. Your second point and question too of, what do we see within firms with marketing and business development? They're absolutely on an island from what we've seen, and again, though, this is the traditional mindset, right? We know how to sell tax and audit. We know how to market tax and audit. And that's where, sometimes firms think that's where the money is. But then CAS is like the fastest growing business line. So when are we going to redirect some of those efforts and focus on CAS? And so I do think that they feel like they're on an island. To be honest, though, I think it's really hard for people outside of CAS to sell CAS from a business development standpoint. And so you do need CAS leaders, you do need CAS teams on those sales calls. And so it's really working with them, I think, a little bit deeper and more integrated than it would with a tax or audit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have given so much information in a very short time period. I do want to leave listeners with some actionable advice. So, for firm leaders just starting to rethink CAS goals, like where should they start?
So the one is we just revamp the goals so that I'm not asking you to change their charge hour budget. I'm asking you to change the goals that are tied to it. And can we just, and as CAS leaders, you kind of have to go to bat to your partners to say, listen, we're going to have the revenue, we're going to have the margin, but can we change those goals? So, one of those that we talked about was taking on more clients, which means you have to push work down, implementing technology, which means that's going to free up time to give you to take on new work, becoming a tech champion, right? And in a product that you're passionate about. I love this one too. Michelle and I talk a lot about exposure versus experience, but what are you getting brought into? So one of the goals is to bring your managers in to participate in those proposals, participate in listening into those sales calls, because how are they going to learn it if they don't hear it every day, all the time, right? And so when you don't bring them into that, all we do is just create this bigger gap between, directors, partners, and managers, senior staff. So participating in proposals. But then, like, to say, here's what we did last time, take a stab at creating the proposal, right? And we'll do a ton of podcasts too. But I mean, obviously, you have to do prospect analysis before this goes into that. So, but it's really just giving all of these team members an opportunity to participate and see the whole big picture and the whole process and incent them to be a part of it, to incent them to be on the proposal calls, creating that loyalty. And how do you were saying, how do what do we do for the staff and team? That's exciting for them. They're like, oh my gosh, we just won this client and I'm so excited and I can't wait to onboard them. And, you know, it becomes very personal. And so I think just however you can create that personal connection with your team members. So that's one too. The upselling services, what we talked about. There's a lot of clients that don't realize what a lot of these CAS teams do. And so it's
Yeah.
taking something and saying, hey, you know what? You're in this specific industry niche, right? Whether it's restaurant or construction, whatever. Here's what we're doing for this client over here. Does this seem like something that you would be interested in? Upselling. So then giving them like some upselling goals. Again, we're just creating revenue. We're not trying to take the firm revenue down. We're trying to just create that sustainable revenue. Partnering with, a tax partner or a tax team that was worked really well for me and Michelle. She was really, really good at that, where they're like, "Well, we get what you do now. Like, we didn't really know what you did, but now that you're working on this client with me, I totally understand the value that you're providing." And once you have just one team that really, truly, deeply understands what you're doing, they bring you into all of these. And that's now your cross-selling revenue, right? And so again,
And that's one of the problems in firms that operate in silos. So people don't
right.
know what other people are doing. So I think that's a really great goal to reset. I love that one.
Yeah. So that's one too. And then the margin improvement that we talked about, let's take our bottom 5% or 5 clients, whatever that looks like. And let's just figure out, how do we revamp this? How do we have the conversation to either move them up or out? Right. And what does that look like? Because we're only going to move them out maybe when we replaced it with another, we already just won this client. And now we're not so fearful to have this conversation with this other client, because all we're doing is upskilling even just our client base
Yeah.
without
That
telling
is
people what.
right. That is a comprehensive list of revised CAST team goals. We will make sure to put that in the show notes so people have something to walk away with from this episode. I think that's really important. We just don't want to inundate people with information. We want to give them the content that they can actually put into action in their firm. So that'll be in the show note, folks. Christine, I want to ask you, do you have any brief parting words of wisdom, anything that you think we didn't cover on this episode, this first ever episode of Fancastic?
Everything that we just talked about is a rabbit hole of what we can go through. But I love what you just said too. Like, our whole goal with this podcast is to just bring awareness to, CAS teams, but then also to other leaders that aren't in CAS, just to get some understanding and perspective. So I think that that's really important. And we're very passionate about that. And also, to your point as well, is walking away with something tangible, with some action items, right? It's not just, hey, we're just here to like, because that's where we get, and misery loves company, and it's all the things that, like, don't work, but now how can we just try to move the needle? So, I'm excited.
I love that. So you have served up a lot for cast teams to ingest, to think about, to let marinate, to take action on. And we hope that our listeners feel the same way. Thank you for joining us today. As we sign off, we want you to remember a few things. We created this podcast to be your go to cast resource. That is our promise to you. And this is Fancastic.